Welcome to A Little Bit Radical, a business podcast from Standing on Giants. I'm Rob, your host. Join me as I meet people and organisations who are doing things differently, challenging the status quo and, yes, might just be a little bit radical. Beautiful, affordable brand tracking. That's the concept behind Tracksuit, a disruptor in the marketing data sector. Brand tracking data, i.e. the data on how a particular brand is perceived and performing in the market, has long only been available to massive corporations paying millions of dollars to large consultancies. Tracksuit is aiming to change that by creating an always-on platform for brands of any size to access. I'm speaking to the co-founder, Matt Herbert, today. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Rob, great to be here. Looking forward to this.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Matt, if you are a little bit radical and you're on our podcast, so we know that you are, what in your early life set you up for that?
The first thing that came to mind about whether I'm radical or what might have contributed to that is my father, Bruce, in my own eyes, is the OG entrepreneur in my family. Dad was one of the early experiential leaders that brought experiential leadership into New Zealand. And so think taking execs and board directors, rock climbing and anything you can think about team building out in nature. That's where Dad's kind of had his area, and so he's always had his own business. He's always worked for himself. I think that for me is looking at the term entrepreneurship or business owners. I look back to that, and then growing up, I just said yes to everything. Whether it was soccer, football, rugby, cricket, golf. Performing arts was a big part of my early career, and then through the work, I've worked courier factories, I've worked in hospitality, I've worked in brand ambassadorship, and then went through into the early days with Uber, and then in the world of Snapchat, and most recently with Tracksuit. So I point the radicalness to the OG entrepreneur in my family, my father.
Shout out to Bruce. I think listeners would have been able to figure out there. So you're a New Zealander, right?
Born and bred
New Zealander. And do you think there's anything about being a New Zealander that has contributed to your entrepreneurial identity? I had my honeymoon in New Zealand and I just completely fell in love with this country and lots of the things about it. But do you think about that at all, or not really?
I got married in July and I still haven't booked our honeymoon. So that's a good reminder there, Rob.
You probably won't get away. You probably won't get away with staying in New Zealand, though.
I'm living in London and spending my time between London and New York. I actually have an English wife, so this is
Oh, she'll love it then. Yeah, go for it.
To your question about growing up in New Zealand and how that contributed to a radical upbringing. I mean, it's an outdoor lifestyle, it's a pioneering lifestyle, but I think one of the biggest things I look at is the creativity and innovation that comes out of New Zealand. I mean, we're on the other side of the world, there's 5 million people, but it's also a nation that's big enough and modern enough to really have to evolve and take things to the world. And it's not a big enough market to be insular. And so a great testing and learning place in New Zealand to incubate ideas and take them to market, prove and validate, definitely. But then there's that need to go global. And so I guess there's something there. As I look back in my career and where I am now, see myself as really wanting to be an enabler of creativity. And when I say the word creativity, some of the best advertising agencies, some of the best campaigns, some of the best work comes out of New Zealand, and it's really, really respected in the world of marketing and advertising and creativity. Myself, I don't regard myself as an artist or the one on the canvas, but if I can be the one that enables the world of creativity in business concepts, I think that's really shaped who I am and what I want to be doing, and fortunate to be now doing that with Tracksuit.
Every entrepreneur I've met from New Zealand, maybe this applies to most entrepreneurs, but there does seem to be a kind of, I'd call it fearlessness, but like without an arrogance, just kind of like, well, I'm doing this next, yep. It's just like a straightforwardness. I don't know whether I'm kind of accurate there in capturing something.
Away on the weekend, back in New Zealand actually, and we was in a fortunate position to hear Tim Kugel, the first CEO of Yahoo, speaking. And there was an interesting conversation happening about what is special about New Zealanders as they come to the world. In New Zealand, we have to be very good generalists. So we're very good across a general range of things, and we have to be, whether that's in the world of agriculture or building rockets or engineering or creativity and advertising. We've got a nation of very good generalists. when you come over to somewhere like the US or somewhere like the UK, because the population is so big, you can really specialize and you can be in a really niche role, insular niche role, the best in the world at it. But I think the combination of New Zealand having to have that general skill, that's quite unique about the country and the type of people that come out. We obviously need great specialists, and the really good generalists pairing up with the specialists and the niches that you find in bigger markets like the UK or the US. There's something there. There's something there for sure.
Very relevant to standing on giants. I think the definition of a kind of niche company, building online communities, really specializing in that kind of one-to-one engagement with customers. And we're a UK company with a lot of work in the US. So
that's what I love now. I spend my time between London and New York predominantly as we've been setting up our new offices this year and in those markets. And what I always find fascinating and I love is that because in the US and the UK, there's such big populations, even if you're in a niche thing, there's enough of a population that you can have a market in there. And so whether it's restaurants or cuisines or aspects of community building, there's enough people or a percentage of the population for that to sustain. You take that to a 5 million person population in New Zealand, you just don't get that because there's not enough foot traffic going through for the weird and the wonderful to sustain that over the long term.
You're not going to get the cereal cafe popping up in sort of regional New Zealand. That's a London thing.
What's the cereal cafe?
It's a cafe, just does cereal. That's it. Imported cereal. That's it.
I'll have to go on a hunt.
Although I reckon I could see that in Auckland personally, but there's one for another day. As an adult, do you think you've become more or less radical, and what's been behind that?
Have I become more or less radical? I think objectively looking in, people would say I've got more radical, but I just think I keep saying yes to things. If I look back outside of university, my first job was with Uber, was with the launch of Uber in 2014 and 15 in New Zealand. Before cars went on the road, I don't know if you can remember, I got a law and science degree out of Christchurch in New Zealand. And then all of a sudden I found myself not doing law or science, but working with one of the biggest, newest technology businesses that was rolling out globally. And so I think looking at that move to say, I saw that brand, I saw the technology and an opportunity to join the early team. And that was a pretty big move. And I was really weighing up, do I finish my law degree or do I go into Uber, full time and put that on pause? I only had a year and a half left of my degree. So I finished my studies and then I finished my time up at Uber. But that was really, really pivotal, kind of sliding doors moment for me in my career. Big technology, operating like a startup, but the responsibility of bringing that brand to market. And you look back and you're saying, going and convincing people to jump in strangers' cars, that was a big thing at the time. And so that then from Uber, I then had an opportunity to join had some friends that were working at a Snapchat management company. It was a vertical storytelling. We were enabling brands and agencies to leverage Snapchat as a new channel within the world of marketing. A radical new channel. How do you figure that out? I had some buddies of mine that were running this company. I'd never been to Sydney. But I said, yes, I packed my bags, I moved to Sydney without ever being there. And so from law to Uber, and then from never living in Sydney to moving to Sydney, and then from, coming back and founding Tracksuit with my co-founders. It was like, how do we start something from nothing, take out a few wireframes, see if we could get a few brands to pay us for it and take that opportunity to see. So am I getting more radical? Possibly.
I suppose if you keep saying yes to things, you'll end up accumulating new experiences. And I think often about the thing about what can look like being a little bit radical is having accumulated a lot of very interesting experiences. And if you say yes to that, then that's what's going to happen. I'm linking that back to your theatre background that you mentioned, and the game Yes Let's was like one of the first things you learn when you're doing drama and theatre, right, is to say yes. I don't know whether you've drawn that thread yourself, but I've noticed that in myself as a former actor as well.
Interesting. I mean, it was formative years in the performing arts world, and then sport took over. So maybe there's still a little part of me that still thinks I'm on stage.
Maybe a stretch. Well, the whole world is a stage, as someone famous once said. Let's get into your work now, and let's get into Tracksuit. So you've given us a little taster of founding the company, but tell us what it is, but first and foremost, and what you're trying to do.
Tracksuit, we are a brand tracking platform for modern brands. Ultimately, our vision is to get brands on the agenda at every boardroom. And how do we build Tracksuit as this common language to measure and communicate the value that brand has on long-term sustained business growth. And so, as you mentioned, the concept of brand tracking is one of the oldest in the world of research. It's quite simply saying, how big is our addressable market? How well is our brand known? Who considers us? Where's the most preferred? What do people think and feel about our brands? What does that compare to the competitor sets? And ultimately, how do we inform our strategy, measure the impact of what we're doing, and be able to iterate ongoing to build really future-proof, strong businesses? Now, it's been available for the biggest businesses in the world. Think Unilever's and Coca-Cola's and Johnson & Johnson's, all spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds on research to stay ahead of where does our brand need to be? What's the competition doing? But it's just inaccessible, complex, cost prohibitive for modern brands. And so my co-founders and I, Connor, we used to work together. We'd known each other for 8 years. We ended up back in New Zealand, pairing up with James Herman, which is one of the world's leading brand strategists and brand planners. And there was this concept of, we love brands, we looked at modern businesses, but there was this problem. For the last 15 years, it has been incredibly easy to pump money into performance marketing channels. Think Meta and Google and Instagram. You put £1 in, you get £3 back. And all of a sudden, there was seeing these diminishing returns. We put £1 in, we get 80p back. And there was that, like, why is this happening? And James, with his brand planning and brand strategy background, it's a case of what gets measured gets managed. And modern brands have been so focused on conversions and performance marketing at the expense of how we're building brands and sustain long-term businesses. So Connor and I, with our software backgrounds and our brand love, with James and our research partners, said, how do we actually build Tracksuit to provide the fundamental visibility on brand performance and your brand health that can sit alongside your performance marketing and really champion brands to do both? Get your performance marketing right, build strong brands, and ultimately we'll see great sustained business over term. So there's a little walk back in memory lane of around and what we're doing here at Tracksuit now.
You're making me think of the long and the short of it. Lesbiano, Peter Field, right? The value of combination of long-term brand investment and short-term sales activation, right?
That's right. So that long and short, written in 2013, my co-founder James released a book a couple of years ago called Future Demand, which is why is brand building important for modern brands? A continuation of the long and short. A real passion and mission for us right now is to take the world of brand building principles and marketing principles and the world of effectiveness, but use Tracksuit as this common language to back up those principles with modern data and modern examples. So as we come into 2025, expect to see a lot more of those principles, but what does that look like right now? Whether it's, liquid death, or whether it's Airbnb, or, what are those modern examples where we can stand on the shoulders of the giants and the world of effectiveness, but bring it into 2025. And that's really what we're looking to do here with Tracksuit.
Yeah, it's really cool. Let's sort of walk through the journey a bit, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind. My old boss, Shelley McIntyre, who's now joined BBC Studios, actually, as I'd call it, super senior, supreme overlord of marketing. That's not the official name, BBC Studios. But she was, at the time, marketing director for Sipsmith, and she made the mistake of hiring me. But I remember her saying she'd come from Coke, and she was like, I have no data. How can I do this job? And so talk me through, say you're a challenger gin brand like Sipsmith was at the time. How would you use Tracksuit? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so that's what we're building for, is those challenger and modern and emerging consumer brands. And so with Tracksuit, what we do is we get you set up, and we're sending thousands and thousands of surveys out every single week, talking to your potential customers. In the case of, we'd be speaking to gin drinkers every single week, every single month here in the UK, actively recruiting and making sure we've got nationally representative populations, really credible and robust ways that we do our research. Invite those consumers in, and then we talk to them. And we say, hey, look, what brands are you aware of? Sipsmith, Hendrix, Bombay. Who would you consider? Who's your most preferred? What do you think and feel about Sipsmith? What do you think and feel about Bombay? And what that can do is really answer those fundamental questions around how well are we moving people through the funnel First job, awareness. It's very hard to sell to someone that doesn't know who you are. So often there's an awareness job to be done. And then looking at who considers our brand. Our research shows that we track 7,000 brands across 400 categories. 97% of categories, consumers have a maximum of around about 3 brands that they consider at any time. So then the job to be done for SipSmith is, well, can we get into that consideration set? Are we one of those brands that people are considering? Because if we're not, then we've got a really, poor chance of actually being able to sell to. And we can waste a whole lot of money trying to target people that actually don't even know about us or not even considering. And then what we look at is to say, well, why is a consumer considering SipSmith versus a Hendrix? And so what are the perceptions? What's driving consideration? What's driving preference? And so that then can influence your communications, who you're targeting, your campaigns. Really, what's the job to be done? Where are you winning? Where are you losing? What's the job to be done to drive that brand in the right way? And so we're doing that for every brand, for every category. And it's really rewarding to be able to inform those strategies, see great work going out and the results coming off the back of it. So that's a little bit about what we're doing with Tracksuit.
Well, it seems to be one of the unique things you're doing is creating a kind of always on kind of view as well, right? Because my understanding is you would be able to do this work on a kind of cycle. If you were one of these big companies, you'd be able to do like a big project that costs a lot of money and you'd be able to get that kind of snapshot, but you're doing it all the time, right?
That's right. So Tracksuit is always on brand tracking. And so your results are available whenever you need them. And that was to solve the problem of if you're a brand or a marketer trying to make decisions, you don't want to be making decisions on
old data
that's from 6-12 months ago. Competition comes in, the seasons change. If you're going into a board meeting, how do you present, here's where we are right now, instead of relying on something that was 6 months old? Or if you're working with your agency, what should we be doing? How do we inform our strategy? What should we be, iterating in market? Well, it's hard to do that unless you've got up-to-date, real-time view about where you're at and where you've come from. And talking, about your old boss who came from, was it Coca-Cola?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect example around what we're doing and where we came from at Tracksuit. And we had this idea for brand tracking. We had a list of 100 of the best CMOs and brand leaders in New Zealand. We designed some frames and some mock-ups and basically a PDF. And we just went top to bottom. We reached out saying, hey, you're really respected as a brand leader, as a CMO. Can we get some feedback around what we have in mind? Talking to people like your boss, ex-Unilever, Coca-Cola, P&G. What do you really love about your brand tracking? What do you hate about it? What do we hate about it? It's expensive, complex.
Slow.
It's slow. It comes in CSV or 100-page slide decks or presentations. But what do you actually look at? Oh, we look at the exec summary. Do you get really excited when a consultant's coming in to present your brand research to you? And so that's what we really tried to say, hey, how do we take the best of brand tracking? How do we take the exec summary? And that's what we built in. We said if we can do the exec summary in a simple, actionable way that's cost effective and do it all the time, that's really the foundations about where Tracksuit came from. So you've got that always on, up-to-date view around where you are, your category, your competitors, to make those decisions.
How many of those initial people that you contacted said yes and were happy to give you some feedback?
By the time we had, I think it was the 68th conversation,
yeah,
we had 11 marketers and brands that said, hey, if you can do this, we'll pay you for it.
Yeah.
And we gave it nice, friendly makes rates to a few of those. And we said, we think we can do it for X amount, but we'll charge you $10,000 for the year. And by the 68th conversation, we had 11 brands signed up. And that we took that $110,000 and we hired an outsourced engineer and we built the first MVP or first iteration of Tracksuit. And that's literally where it started. So we had people saying, here's the money, go and do it. And that was the challenge, and that's where we set off.
I mean, that's a sign of a well-marketed business and a well-marketed product in itself, right? If the customer's need is so profound that they're willing to pay for it before they've even seen whether the product can work, right?
Well,
yeah.
The world of, startups and scaling business and the world of venture capital, the last 15 years, money's basically been free. And so there's been a whole lot of money that's been dumped into Connor and I. We call it the VC validation. We get a whole lot of money, teams go away and they spend a lot of time building products and what they think the market's doing. feedback goes back and forth between the VC and the brands, but they're not actually talking to the market or the customers. And you've spent millions of pounds working on this product, look up, try to take it to market and realize it's interesting, but people don't want to pay you for it. Or actually there's
Or it
not
doesn't
the
work,
market, or it doesn't work. That was really important for Connor and I. We said, we don't want to go down that VC path. We want to make sure that we are solving genuine problems with a great solution that brands and marketers will pay for, and we commercialized it straight away. We hired as fast as we could sell Tracksuit and bring brands on. And so for 18 months, we bootstrapped. We hired basically one person a month for 18 months. And then we decided, actually, you know what? We had VCs knocking on the door, and we, to capture the opportunity, which you're talking about, let's go down that path. And so it was 18 months of bootstrapping and validating and commercially validating the idea and the product, which compared to years gone by was quite a radical way to think about it.
That is radical, and I like it. And I'd imagine that at the end of those 18 months, you had a much stronger idea of what you'd actually spend this VC money on, because the past, as you say, is littered with these examples of companies that have raised a bunch of money and then just wasted it. I was hearing about Cameo the other day that obviously exploded during the pandemic, and, spending money on Cameo Con and, just these ridiculous things, and thinking that they were going to be like the Disney of the next 100 years, it's just kind of out of touch,
I mean, yeah, there's a whole lot of luck that goes into businesses as well, right? It's like, they're a great problem, great solution, great business, but there's a whole lot of luck that goes into that. And with Tracksuit and championing the world of brand marketing and brand marketers who haven't really had the attention the last 15 years. So we're turning up for brand marketing, we're turning up for that community, we're championing why brand drives business. And now you're starting to see this move to, we need to do brands and performance. They work in tandem together. But you look back, and from a VC perspective with lots of money, it was just throw money at the slot machine. Throw money at the slot machine, £1 in, £3 back. And it just didn't scale. I mean, there's great cases over in the US, whether it's Warby Parker or Casper mattresses. Warby Parker in there, when they went public, they had 14% unprompted awareness. So 14% of people in the US actually knew who Warby, or could name Warby Parker. And they're going up against Sunglasses Hut. And so if you're trying to build big business and only 14% of a market actually recalls you, then there's a job to be done around awareness, brand building, that long term. And so we're definitely, writing and wanting to champion why that's important. There's plenty of cases like that from a VC validation perspective.
I suppose that's an interesting use case as well, in that your platform might help investors make smarter investments, right? Or ask better questions about the marketing plan, right?
Totally. Yeah, we work direct to brands, we work with VCs, with private equity, with, agencies, and advertising agencies are a big part for us, our partnerships. And it's all, how do we see the market? What are the brands? What are the movements? How do we actually get visibility, not just from your own customers, but potential customers, an objective read of the market? That's what we're doing. And it's a really powerful way to look at, where do we win? Where do we allocate resource? Who should we invest in? That objective market view.
Let's talk about some success stories, shall we? What are some of your top success stories from your customers who've been using the platform?
Wasabi here in the UK, pre-made ready meals, coming out of a bricks and mortar store into pre-made ready meals where you can get from your local supermarkets. To the piece around, and what we're really proud of is we talk about Tracksuit as career currency. Tracksuit as career currency for brand marketers, brand builders, enabling those to finally be able to go to the boardroom, go to their execs and say, hey, look, this is the impacts that we're having with our brand investments. Typically you could measure the performance marketing and growth marketers with the superstars and businesses, and the brand marketers on TV and and radio and out of home and all that. There's no way to measure it. And so always under scrutiny and pressure and skepticism. And so right now, with half of marketing budgets going into those traditional channels or harder to measure, finally now with Tracksuit, you're able to answer, is what we're doing working, especially where we couldn't see it before. And so in terms of career currency, the team over at Wasabi finally being able to say, look, this is the baseline that we're at. This is where we informed where we're going to spend our marketing budget. This is the impact that we've had, making that case for investment in the right areas. So career currency, building great businesses, really, really proud of that. The second piece, and it's a recent piece, we recently did some work and some research with TikTok. And it was all around what is the impact of having strong brand awareness on the impact on your return of ad spend.
So what was the thing that really came out of that study you did with TikTok that you could share with us?
We recently published a report with TikTok called The Awareness Advantage. And it's all around this brand and performance concept. And so we have this data that looked at advertisers on TikTok, and we looked how well they were building their awareness and consideration. We also looked at how well they were converting through their ads. So conversions in the sense of actually getting people on TikTok to fill out form, submit, click through, and actually take an action. And one of the stats that came out of that, so a brand that has 40% awareness, their ads on TikTok perform 43% better than a brand that has 30% awareness. So if your awareness is higher, your ads perform much better. And finally, this is a way to take to finance and accounting teams and skeptics to say, the better we build our brand today, the harder our performance marketing works, the better our return on ad spend efficiencies. And now we're getting into a commercial conversation around the role of brand marketing.
Is 40% awareness, is that like a really high benchmark, or is that like a pretty achievable benchmark for a business that's doing well?
For a business that's doing well, that's where the real threshold is. In simple terms, we'll ask a question. Have you bought shoes or running shoes in the last 12 months?
I actually have. You can test me.
You have? Okay, so we'll do this. All right, Rob, have you bought running shoes in the last 12 months?
Yes.
Okay, which of these brands are you aware of? Hoka.
No.
On Running.
Yes.
Nike.
Yes.
Adidas.
Yes.
Solomon.
Yes.
New Balance.
Yes.
Asics.
Yes.
So we go through and we do that across a whole lot of brands. And so 40%, if 1 in 2 people know your brand, I mean, that's strong. If we look at Nike, 96% awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you look at something more mid-market and growing and achievable, that 40% is really solid in your category. And so that's how we get to those types of metrics.
Interesting. It was On Running shoes that I bought everyone. I know that you were desperate to know which ones I bought. There we go.
But off the back of the Awareness Advantage report that we did with TikTok, one of our customers, The Real over in the US, a luxury marketplace, they actually went and looked at their own brand health data, looked at their conversion metrics, and have come to the same results. And so finally being able to go and show the better we build our brand today, the more efficient our performance marketing and our return on ad spend is. And to be able to finally bring that type of data and insight into the real world with real examples, facilitating that conversation at a board level, that's ultimately our mission, is to get brand at the board level and become this common language. So to see whether it's Wasabi or the real, really fulfilling.
It's funny you were saying, as if it's a big revelation, like having a stronger brand means that people are more likely to buy your thing. There's a lot of cynicism about marketing and advertising, obviously. I've had a lot of chats over the years and people say, oh, advertising doesn't work on me. And then they're the same people who like use Google for everything. Okay, yeah, you understand that you're being sold something in an advert, but brand, you are 100% connected to brands and brand building, and that's why you only use Google for everything, right? Yeah.
Well, so here's something that works when in talks or keynotes. The way we look at this works really well, and an example that we do is to say, at Tracksuit, we view marketing as got 2 jobs to be done. One is to convert your existing demand, and so in any category, there's people who are ready to buy in the category right now, and so one job is to go and convert those people who are ready to buy from you. The second job to be done is to build future demand. So building familiarity and closeness with those who are not ready to buy from the category right now, but at some point in the future will come in. And the better job you've done at warming up that group, the more likely they are to buy from you. And so 2 jobs: convert your existing demands, build your future demands, and then you've got that sustained growth. And so to really visualize that in a room, you'll say, put your hand up if you're planning to buy a new mobile phone in the next couple of weeks.
Very few people put their hand up, right? Yeah.
There's a couple of hands
Yeah.
go up. Who's planning on buying a new phone in the near future or next couple of years? And basically the whole room goes up.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's that concept of there might be 5 to 10% of people ready to buy a phone right now. Okay, great. And then 90% of people, they're going to buy. And so who have they been primed to? Who are they building those connections with right now? That's really what we're helping drive, that common language. And so whether you're a CFO or an accountant or someone that's skeptical of marketing, it's hard to argue with that.
Let's just change tack a little bit as we wrap up the work section, Matt, which is that you're leading a company now and growing fast. And something stuck with me from the last interview that we did. Claire Jones, CEO of Polar Steps, first time CEO. And she said with quite good honesty and vulnerability, and she's like, and I don't really know what a CEO does yet, but so far I think it's about doing a lot of listening and helping people make decisions. And then she very eloquently kind of summarized kind of how she saw the role at the moment. What do you think? Are you having a similar feeling where you don't quite know what the job is yet?
I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that I'm co-CEO of Tracksuit with Connor, and Connor and I have known each other for 8 years. We worked together, we were friends before we jumped into co-found Tracksuit. And so having someone else is amazing. And we rewrite our job descriptions every 6 months. So Connor's based in Auckland, looks after the Southern Hemisphere, and I'm over here in London, spend my time between London and New York, setting up new offices. Before that, when we went out to raise our Series A, which we announced earlier in the year, 90% of Connor's time was speaking to investors and raising that money. He spoke to 104 VCs before we whittled that down to 4 or 5. And then, finally, we're really proud to bring on Altos and Footwork out of SF in the US, as well as customers and Mark Ritson and Essential, who own Can Lines, and Tim Brown from Allbirds and Bree from Frank Body. It was just an amazing group. But to be able to go out and raise that capital while keeping a business going, I feel very lucky that there were 2 of us able to do that. And I put my hat off to any CEO and founder that's able to do both. Always learning. But I think in terms of the role of the CEO, quite simple. I kind of look at it in 5 different views. There's 1, help the team hire the best. And so how do we help our leaders hire phenomenal people with them? Get really clear on what our teams are doing and the expectations of them. Try to push as much authority and decision-making down onto our leaders and our experts. I've always looked at where I want to be a great generalist, but I want to be in a room and be able to throw a tennis ball on people that know way more about any particular subject than I could ever dream of. And, to be able to be doing that now is fantastic. So relentlessly push that authority out. Don't get in their way. But also, a part of the role, and I see the role as helping remove those obstacles and roadblocks and continue to help set direction and the vision of where we're going and what we need to do. And then just repeat. What's the vision? What's the mission? What are we doing?
Repeat until it's boring. Right.
That's the kind of the way I look at it. But learning every single day. But a phenomenal team, and something I'm really proud of is we just ticked over 100 or so people in the company now at Tracksuit, and to see every single person come in engaged, hungry, passionate, really wanting to own the drive of Tracksuit, building into and buying into our core values and our operating principles, and seeing over 100 people really with a sense of ownership now. Amazing role to be in a CEO seat.
Awesome. And what's next? What's coming up? Have you got a B2B product coming up? I'm like, I want this, right? When do I get it as a B2B marketer?
There's an opportunity there. We often joke at some point there'll be a Track Suite where we take on B2B, but
easy rebrand, that one.
Yeah. Right now there's a job to be done with supporting consumer brands, and that's the relentless focus for us right now. We're opening up new markets, Ireland, France, Germany, the next to come out earlier in the new year. Huge advances in the world of AI and large language models. We're tracking over 7,000 brands, talking to potential consumers every single day, and being able to analyze and quickly analyze and tell those stories and support our customers is huge. So product developments, new markets, and staying relentlessly focused on the world of brand and making, brand that commercial driver for businesses, and being the champion and for that. That's what's coming up for us.
So last section of the conversation now, where we turn our attention to the world. And what's a little bit of a radical idea for the world that you would like people to get behind that maybe you're not working on every single day?
Interesting in a personal story is I grew up in New Zealand. I grew up fishing, hunting, duck shooting. I've got 2 ex-dairy farming uncles, but for the last 6 years, I've been vegan, plant-based. I never ever thought that that's something that I would do. I think I was making jokes about vegans probably the week before I realized that I cut fish. But I studied law and science in the world of sustainability. It was a real, area before sustainability was a term. But I've always looked at myself as how do I enable creativity now, but also be that link between responsibilities of what we can do and how do we tie that to commercials. So from a plant-based vegan perspective, I was eating tuna and brown rice every single day in Sydney and watched a piece on commercial fishing. And there was the stat that for 1 pound of fish we eat, 5 pounds is bycatch and we don't do anything with it. And I was just sat there and thought,
horrible, isn't it?
Just the commercial scale of it. And so in that moment, in that seat, watching that, I decided, hey, look, what's something that I can control for myself 3 times a day? And that was my nutrition. I don't expect everybody to do that, but I looked internally and I said, now that I know this, if I don't do something myself, how can I expect anybody else to do it? If we can keep that in mind and the impact that we're having each day, and it doesn't need to be at the end of the scales, but just that consciousness about what's our impact, how are we going about what we're doing, that for me is something I'd love to see more of.
Love that. Well, listeners to the podcast will know how much I love that. I promise that Matt and I didn't meet through some kind of vegan, vegetarian cabal.
But, you know what's actually quite funny that I tell that story, and I actually met my now wife in Sydney. She'd been vegetarian for basically her whole life, and on our first date, I said, I'm flexitarian.
Nice. Yeah.
And then I just think I tried to one-up her and impress her, and I went vegan, and now we both it. So maybe that's more of the truth than the commercial impact.
There you go.
Or the environmental impact.
It's a little bit of starting to be a little bit of a recurring theme, things we've done to impress our future spouses or someone that we hoped was going to be our romantic partner, actually. Maybe that's going to go in the Little Bit Radical book as one of the key drivers. No, good. Thank you for sharing that, Matt. The last question, always the same, and I think you're a good person for this, and we might be able to guess the answer already, but let's see. If there's someone listening who has a little bit of a radical idea for a business, for their personal life, whatever it might be, that they don't quite know where to get started, what advice would you give them?
2 things, straight away. Simple, clear. Get started. A bias to action and the ability to get started and make the first step puts you ahead of 90% of people. How many times do you go down to the pub and you're having a few pints and there's great ideas, solving the world, and then what happens? You wake, don't do anything.
Someone should do.
Like,
this,
we should do this, we should do that, and then how many times does something actually happen? And so, first thing, get started, take action. The second thing is number of conversations. And for Connor and I, right from the start of Tracksuit, was the key metric for us was number of conversations. How many people are we talking to? Are we getting feedback from? Are we taking out to the world instead of being insular, isolated, not actually knowing? And so get started and talk to as many people as you can. People love giving feedback. It's a real honor when someone comes and asks for your advice, to give feedback. And so get started, number 1, and number of conversations. Get out there, talk to people. Don't be afraid to ask for advice and ask for feedback.
Love that, Matt. Thank you very much for giving us your time today, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on your podcast platform. If you'd like to appear on A Little Bit Radical or have an idea of someone we should speak to, please email podcast@standingongiants.com. or get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can search Rob Fawkes or search Standing on Giants and you'll find me there. Thank you very much and speak to you next time.